So today we're going to talk about seek and you shall find. Where do the building products fit into the BIM process? So just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to go over. We're going to learn about what is content creation and how can we use it for our business, as well as how is content created and where does it live today. And then a couple of last topics that we'll talk about is how our organizations successfully using content and how do we get started today with using content creation and seek. So first of all, what is content creation and how can it help our business? A few different things is that content creation is basically, and we're going to focus mainly on how Revit is going to be using content creation today. So it's basically taking the information that we find in a spec sheet and creating a three-dimensional component for that part that we can then implement the metadata information that goes along with the 3D geometry and being able to schedule that information and bring it into Revit to do some architectural rendering, schedule information, find pricing, and allowing us to utilize the abilities inside of Revit to change the size of the product as we move through the design process. Some of the things that we want to touch upon is that we're going to be looking at specifically Seek as one of the avenues for using content creation and what Seek will do for us. So there's a marketing piece to this, especially for manufacturers and how they can become a bigger part of Revit, how these processes are embedded into Revit, and this will give more visualization for manufacturers and their product inside of Revit. So just to show you a little bit of the content that we see in Revit these days are very generic content. They have very little information associated to them. So you can see that with this particular piece that's highlighted in blue, when we select that piece and look at the data that goes along with that, there's not much information there other than maybe a little bit of information on the size. What we're looking for is for the manufacturers to get more involved with this process, to get their information embedded into Revit and into Seek so that the architects and the engineers will have more success with downloading their content, getting content that is already pre-built and already pre-set up with the manufactured spec information. And what's great about that is that the manufacturers are going to now be spec'd into the project earlier on in the design process. It allows us to pull data down from Revit into schedules like information on model information, material finishes, material options that these parts come in, and size options that these parts will come in. That information is already pre-built into the components. We can take a part and change it to another size or change it to another finish, or in this case, take a cabinet and change it to a completely different door style. And then that information will translate into our schedules automatically and populate any of the information that also goes along with it, like model information or spec data.
Thanks, Louise. I wanted to talk a little bit about how BIM content can be a benefit for manufacturers. And kind of like what Louise was talking about, it's essentially a marketing tool, a very powerful marketing tool. And the goal for the manufacturer is to get their products out to a wider audience. 70% of brand new building designs are going to be based on BIM. So the goal for the manufacturer is to be involved in as many of those projects as possible. Leveraging BIM to win new business, helping them collaborate with project stakeholders, which ultimately makes them easier to work with. Really, the overall goal is to gain visibility earlier in the design process, get spec'd in. What that means for a manufacturer is when you are spec'd in, you're going to be included in square footage counts. You're going to be able to remove or reduce errors and omissions, being part of initial costing and a consistent product and project data. The reality is that the design tools being used in the two industries, manufacturing and AEC, differ. So having a format that can be easily consumed by architects and engineers is going to be very important for manufacturers. manufacturers also will typically have multiple options for a single product line. So having a Revit model that is flexible, you're talking about having things like different sizes, lengths and widths. There's going to be different material options and color options. All of this is going to be built into the model, giving the designers greater flexibility and making the manufacturer much easier to work with.
Another aspect that we want to talk about is also where we see things on the architect and the engineer side. What's nice about a website like Seek is that for the architects and the engineers, it's a free download to get that manufactured data into our projects. So we can easily go to Seek, download manufactured created content, and basically utilize their information, their measurements, their calculations that they've done for everything inside of our project, versus the architect and the engineer having to go and research that part or piece. How is it created? How do you put it together? What can it do? What options does it come in? And then potentially have the possibility of getting that wrong because we're trying to create it for our projects along with some spec data that we're finding up on their company website. So by the manufacturers creating this content or working with a team like Microdesk and M2 to help them create this content for them along their guidelines, it's going to access less errors that happen when the architect decides to take on this process, or as well as the architect will be not spending this time on the project, and they can spend that time and money on different parts of the project as well. So it's a great range to pass this on to the manufacturers, and a lot of times the architects and the engineers will put this responsibility back to the manufacturers to provide them content. And with Revit being such a new concept to manufacturers, a lot of times they don't have the skill set to be able to create content inside of Revit. So leaning on a outside company like Microdesk can help, and M2 can help with that process. So let's take a look of how Seek actually works within Revit, and we'll talk about what Seek is in a minute. So Seek is actually built right into Revit out of the box. So you install Revit on your system, you go to this Insert tab like you see here, and you'll see that there's actually a Autodesk Seek search bar or search panel right in the program. So you can basically utilize manufacturer created content now right from Revit, and this is going to allow them to either search by a particular manufacturer or by a category, so whether it be cabinetry, light fixtures, or any other product line that you'd like to look at.
So when we talk about, So when we talk about Seek, essentially what is Seek? We talk about the BIM process in general, we can break it into two areas. There's the content creation, which we've been talking about, and then there's content distribution. If we look specifically at distribution, we ask the question, how are you going to get your products into the hands of architects, engineers, and construction professionals who need to consume the content that you create? Seek is a web service that enables architects, engineers, and design professionals to preview and download the BIM models directly into their design. We're going to show you directly inside of Revit, but it's also available inside of AutoCAD as well as Design Review, I believe. And for building product manufacturers, it's a great way to connect with the designers that are responsible for specifying and recommending their products for purchase.
So next we want to take a look at the actual website and where that can actually lead us. So if we look at the website, then basically when we go and actually run our search of cabinetry or something, it will bring us to the Autodesk Seek website, or we can just go to seek.autodesk.com, and from here we can basically start searching. So if I start searching something as simple as cabinets, as soon as I start typing in that word, it's going to start listing out the manufacturers that are on Seek that have cabinetry. So in this case, there's only one choice. The other case is if I have a particular manufacturer. If I do lighting or lights, you can see that there's a couple of additional lights. But if we go into cabinets and click on that, it'll bring us into that particular manufacturer's page. The way that their page is laid out could be completely different from another manufacturer's, but it fits their need. They have different door styles for their cabinetry that they allow us to choose from. So I can basically scroll down, and once I see a door style that I like, I can actually click on that door style, and it's going to give me the files that go along with that door style. So they've broken it out by their accessories, their base cabinets, tall cabinets, and so on. And then when you download the zip file, you can then place it into your project as you want, and each cabinet will have different sizes that you can use or different finishes. There's also material libraries that are associated to this. So it can be a very powerful tool to use for this process.
Yeah, just to expand a little bit on what Louise is talking about, specifically why manufacturers would be interested in using Seek or having their products on Seek, and essentially is because it's the largest online catalog of Revit data, BIM-Revit data in the marketplace. There's some statistics up on the screen. I'm not going to go through every single one, but if you saw the previous slide where we went into Seek, currently there's about 66,000 commercial and residential products by about 1,000 manufacturers, and that's growing all the time. And Louise was illustrating some of the powerful parametric search technology that's available. So you can search by attributes, dimensions, materials, manufacturer name, like she had typed in. You can preview and explore the models before you download them, so you can zoom them, rotate them. And also it supports multiple file formats. So whether you're looking for Revit, DWG files, Word documents, PDFs, those are available. Some of the other things that would be advantageous to a manufacturer are things like custom branding. So what you can do is differentiate your product with custom design, say your company logo, customize your search and product pages to match your brand's look. You can advertise out there, you can put promotions, special events that you might have coming up. You can do all that through Seek. And it can also be integrated directly into your company website. So you can have people search and download products the same way they would do it through Seek on your site as well. It's essentially, I guess they call it a microsite. And the look and feel is similar to your corporate site, but it's hosted by Autodesk. And finally, some of the nice tools that are available are the analytics, which will allow manufacturers to track how their products are performing. So they can get an idea about who's searching for us, who's viewing our products, who's downloading our products. It gives you some really good information about potential clients that maybe you haven't worked with in the past, potential projects that you may not be aware of. So there's some really good tools in there that are going to be advantageous to the manufacturing community using Seek.
So a few organizations that we're going to look at for some case studies that we've done. These are 3 clients that we've worked with over the past few years, and they're a different range of products that we're going to cover to just give you an idea of what these manufacturers were looking to do, how we were able to help them get there, and what the results are for those manufacturers. The first one that we're going to talk about is Lumenpulse. They are a lighting manufacturer out of Montreal, Canada. What they were seeing was that they were having more architects and engineers asking for BIM content from them. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of lighting manufacturers out there these days, and it's a very competitive market for getting their product into a project. And the earlier that they can do that, the more likely they are to stay in the project by the end of the design. And so they found that Seek was actually a great way to market their content and reach a larger audience that they might not have been reaching with just using their internal website. Originally, they actually decided that they just wanted to do the content and host it on their website and use it for internal distribution. So an architect is asking for a model and they'll email the model to them. Later, they found that there was a greater need to expand that into actually using Seek and taking advantage of what Seek has to offer. The analytics that is involved were a powerful decision for them, and also seeing that they had some of their competitors up on Seek as they were already was very powerful to them to have them make the decision to move to using Seek as well. Basically, they've done multiple projects with us to date where we have created the content for them. We are Seek content creators. We're certified with how the Seek guidelines work, because with Seek, this is something I forgot to mention earlier, but with Seek they have a very quality assurance that you have to meet in order for it to be Seek certified content. So in order to host the content to Seek, it's not just whoever makes it, it's going to be hosted up there. It has to meet like a 64-point test that it passes in order for it to be hosted to Seek, which means you're going to get quality content that works correctly. It's going to act the way that you want it to. And they're standardizing how certain things are going to look from one manufacturer to another to a degree. You still have your representation of your content, but when I look at it in floor plan, it's going to represent for a door being with an open swing, but when I look at it in elevation, I want to see the door as a closed option so that I can do like a rendering or a colored elevation. So those type of things get taken in consideration when building the content and how the content gets tested. So this is just one of the many examples of light fixtures that we did for them. And so this is the Revit model that you can then basically look at the data that's associated to it. So there's a lot. It couldn't fit it on one single area, so I had to put it into two. And all of this data is changing depending on the model that's being used. So as we change from a large light fixture to medium or small, this data will change for the model information, as well as if we choose a 277 volt versus a 120 volt light fixture. There's other options as well. I'm just using that as a generalization. And then this is just an image of showing it in one of their buildings that they've actually put for a project on this.
One of the other projects that we've been involved in over the past year or so was with OBO Betterman. They're a manufacturer of cable support and routing systems and fastening systems and surge and lightning protection systems. They're based in Germany. The group that we were working with, the U.S. headquarters is in Pennsylvania. They serve a number of industries worldwide, including building and tunnel construction, shipbuilding, power stations, data centers. There's a wide variety of industries that they're involved in. OBO Betterman was looking to meet the growing demand for BIM content in their industries and expand their quality brand and set them apart, essentially, in a very competitive marketplace. One of the reasons that kind of spurred them along, and I think it's similar to some of the other projects we've been involved in, is that competitors were already headed down the BIM path and they didn't want to get left behind. So for this project, we essentially started with one of their more common products. They're one of their top sellers, if you will, as a pilot project. And soon after going live on the Seek website, OBO Betterman saw a significant increase in activity, including a sale with a large box store chain that they had previously not worked with in the past. So we have another round of content that's being planned for early 2015. So they're looking to expand on what we've already done. So it's been a very successful project so far.
And one of the last case studies we're going to do today is with a company called Masco, and they have a bunch of different sub-companies, and Marilat was one of the sub-companies that we worked specifically with. They're a cabinet company from Michigan, and they are part of a bigger company called Masco, and Marilat is just one of the parts of Masco. One of the reasons that they decided to go for BIM is they were getting a lot of requests, like some of the other people we talked about, from architects and engineers, or in this case interior designers, that were looking for the Revit products. So they have actually taken pretty much their entire Marilat catalog and placed it, or had us create the cabinetry for those parts, along with some of the accessories that go along with that. They then decided to take those products, and just to give you an idea of the size of their catalog, we have created over 1,800 Revit families for them, and within those 1,800 Revit families, there are 18 different door styles that are associated to that. So architects and interior designers can now utilize their products, and they can go through and change door styles to see if there's a door style that they like more than another, and go through that process. They then took that 3D or the Revit content, the BIM content, had us export it to AutoCAD as three-dimensional blocks that they can basically provide to their clients that are still working with AutoCAD, so that they can attack a larger market, or a larger client need, if you will. And as far as what's coming up for them in the future, is we're working with them to do a marketing press release video with their team. So this is just one of the simpler designs that we looked at from one of their cabinets that comes in only white. We placed it together just to give them a feel of how their project is going to look, and then we also went through and got some of their custom pieces to place through a kitchen to show them how it would look like when it renders with the wooden stuff as well. So how can you guys get started today? There's actually two ways. You can decide to do it yourself, and I want to talk about some pros and cons on both the do-it-yourself and the outsourcing. So with doing it yourself, you basically are able to, your product inside and out, so you're not training somebody on how your product is actually being created, which is definitely a big pro. One of the things that we find is that clients want to get their product out into Revit immediately, or very, very quickly. And to be able to take on your day-to-day task, as well as doing your design for creating this content in Revit, takes too much time, and it ends up throwing a process that could take 3 weeks into a process that will take like 6 months to finish. The other side of this too is that you have to know how to use Revit. So either you're hiring somebody that already knows how to use Revit, or you're going through training and buying software that for Revit in order to accomplish this. So there's definitely some drawbacks, but there's some good parts to it as well, because you know your content better than anybody else does. What outsourcing allows us to do is, or allows you to do, is basically you are able to lean on somebody like Microdesk and M2 who already know the SEEK guidelines, who already know how Revit works, who already have the software. So you can basically hire us to create the content for you, and we can do it within either a long time frame or a short time frame, depending on what your needs are. So if you're looking to get your content out before you have to present it for a show or a trade show of some sorts, we can definitely attach additional resources that we have on staff to accomplish that. So that's definitely some of the pros. We work hand in hand with you with going over and having you kind of teach us how your product works in a sense. And we go through a rigorous checks and balance schedule with you guys to make sure that you're getting the content to work the way that you want it to. It has all of its options that you want it to have in there. And we basically make sure that you have final approval on the content before it actually gets even hosted to the SEEK website. And so this is just one of the doctor offices that or dentist offices, if you will, that we did a bunch of content for, so that you can kind of get a broader picture of how this content can be represented in Revit. And this was fully created and designed and rendered right inside of Revit.